It's been about a year and a half since Candace Owens left the Daily Wire, and in that time, her independent YouTube show has absolutely exploded. She now has almost 5 million subscribers, and her recent live streams have been bringing in around 1 million views while she is live. So by the end of the time the live stream ends, she has 1 million views on that video, and the numbers just keep climbing. Her first episode of her investigative series of the killing of Charlie Kirk has been her most popular video to date, with over 8 million views, and it's only been up for about 3 or 4 days as of this recording. But despite the really big numbers, Candace's success appears fragile. She seems almost intoxicated by rage, and as she has often remarked in her own investigations, when people are emotional, that's when they often make mistakes. Now, she's doing an amazing job of pulling her viewers in and getting them just wrapped up in the story and the controversy of Charlie's murder. And I think that that's a really good thing that she is doing, because she's bringing to light all sorts of inconsistencies in the story that the FBI and the feds and Utah Governor Cox are telling us. So that's a really important service and important work that needs to be done. But at the same time, like I said, she's getting so emotional about it, and not that she doesn't remain calm on camera, but she's making sometimes rather wild sounding claims at this point, claims that some people are having a hard time believing and a hard time sticking with her through. Candace seems absolutely determined to bring whoever is responsible for Charlie's death to justice, and she seems willing to stop at absolutely nothing to do that, on that mission, right? But there's a risk that she could damage her own credibility in the process, that as high as her numbers are climbing and as quickly as they are growing, that she might wind up flying a little too close to the sun. People are questioning many of Candace's claims and her motives. Some people are saying that she wasn't really nearly as close to Charlie as she is claiming, that they haven't been friends for years, that they broke up years ago and their friendship ended. Other people are saying that whether or not she and Charlie were friends, that she had no idea what Charlie was, quote, going through, and essentially that she's making it up, that she is really guessing at what he was going through, and she hadn't heard it directly from him at all. But whether or not she and Charlie were as close as she claims that they were in the years and months leading up to his death, she still could be doing this with a great motive. She still could love him and really want to see justice for whoever murdered him. But other people are making a far worse claim that she has a bad motivation, that the reason that she is telling this story and making this such a focus on her channel and making these essentially sensational videos about the investigation is because she's making it all about herself and she's just chasing the views. That maybe she doesn't even care about Charlie at all, but she's just doing it for her own gain, to grow her brand essentially. A few of these controversial claims that Candace has been making include, first of all, that Charlie was being very pressured and even threatened by Zionists leading up to his death, that they were demanding that Charlie break ties with people who are perhaps anti-Zionist, and that Charlie go back to his old beliefs and old talking points where he was strictly Zionist and unapologetically so. Second, Candace claims that Tyler Robinson, the man that has been charged with Charlie's death, either didn't do it at all, or at least that he didn't act alone. And third, and perhaps most significantly, that the FBI and maybe Utah Governor Cox are working to actively cover up and perhaps shield whoever is truly responsible for Charlie Kirk's death. Now, it seems like we should be able to figure out who's telling the truth here by checking the receipts. After all, receipts are flying right now. Candace is pulling out all sorts of screenshots and showing them in her videos, and many of the people who she is accusing of wrongdoing are pulling up their own receipts and posting them on on X and other platforms. But here's the problem. Most of this proof is not verifiable. When there is proof, and there often isn't, or any sort of evidence that is presented, often the evidence comes without dates. So you have no idea when a certain message was sent, or something was published, or something was said or not said. And even if there is a date, you don't really know for sure if that piece of evidence is actually authentic. In this day and age that we live in with AI, it is easier than ever to fabricate evidence, especially when we're not even looking at physical evidence, but we're just looking at a screenshot of something. So for example, in a few of her recent live streams, Candace has been telling us that this billionaire named Bill Ackman was heavily pressuring Charlie to, like I said, go back to his old Zionist beliefs, Zionist talking points, and maybe to put out certain speakers at his events or bring other speakers in. I don't know what all Candace exactly thinks that Bill Ackman was pressuring Charlie to do, because I don't think that she's made that very specifically clear, but she says that Bill Ackman was really pressuring Charlie, that he was really laying on the heat. It made Charlie really uncomfortable, possibly even scared. And she hasn't provided any real evidence for this. And that seems a little suspicious to me, but what she's kind of implied is that Charlie confided this in with her personally, that maybe he told this to her verbally. She certainly hasn't said that, but since she hasn't said Charlie texted this to me or emailed this to me or provided any screenshots of anything, I think the assumption is that it must have been some sort of verbal personal communication. Now, Bill Ackman has responded to these accusations by providing two things. One is a screenshot of some texts between him and Charlie that essentially show that they were on really good, friendly terms. Now, the big problem with this piece of evidence is that there's no dates on it, so we have no idea when they were on good terms or what may have transpired since then. Bill Ackman has also provided another piece of evidence. Kind of. He provided a very detailed telling of exactly what went down in the Hamptons when he and Charlie had that event together back in August of this year. Now, I think that this provides a little bit of evidence because there were other people there who could either back up what Bill Ackman is saying in this story that he tells and with all the details that he includes, or could refute it, but I haven't seen very many people coming out and doing that. One other piece of evidence that goes against the narrative that Candace has been telling about the events that transpired that weekend in the Hamptons is a few people from Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization, that seem to be backing up Bill Ackman's claim that nothing bad happened that weekend, that no one was pressuring Charlie, that they had a good time there, and nothing was really wrong. However, they didn't specifically come out and say, yes, what Bill Ackman says, that's exactly what happened. And I'm pretty suspicious whenever people say that multiple sources are telling them something. For example, Candace says that people in the neighborhood where the man who's been charged with Charlie Kirk's killing, okay, that man, his name is Tyler Robinson, and she says that she's talked to people in the neighborhood and they've told her things about like a vacant house that was owned by the university and some different things about the neighborhood. And whenever we hear people in the neighborhood or multiple people told me, I'm always pretty suspicious of that. I'm like, how many people really told you this same thing? I think if it was a high number, that you would probably be saying that number. Like 7 different people told me. And since you're not saying the number, that makes me think that it was probably actually just 1 or 2 people. And so similarly, when we have, quote, people from TPUSA backing up the idea that nothing suspicious, nothing weird, nothing bad happened at that weekend in the Hamptons, I don't really know whether that is true or not, or how significant that claim and that evidence is, especially when we have other people from TPUSA coming out and kind of confirming what Candace is saying, that Charlie was in fact being heavily pressured by Zionists. And that's really how most of Candace's claims ultimately end up playing out. Sometimes she provides evidence, sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes the people who she accuses provide evidence, sometimes they don't. But then whenever evidence is provided, it's really difficult to verify its authenticity or how significant it really is. A lot of the time because, again, dates aren't attached to it. However, there is one thing that I think is really clear here, and that is Candace is fighting a war for her credibility. She, like I said, she is on this crusade to figure out who, in fact, is responsible for Charlie's death and to bring that person to justice. And she can only do that if people believe the claims she's making. And so I think that it would be very illogical for her to not present evidence when she has it. So if she doesn't present evidence, I think we have to assume that she doesn't have it. Now, the whole thing about this is that she often claims that she knows something for a fact, but that she isn't showing the evidence yet. But that essentially, if people push her, if they do the wrong thing, if they don't do what she wants them to do, then she will reveal all. She will show that evidence. She will ruin them. And I really think that that's bad for her credibility, since again, it just wouldn't make any sense for her to not be showing the evidence she has to support her claims. Now, I understand that sometimes you have sources that you want to keep protected or sources that want to remain anonymous. But if that was the case, she still could be showing texts with the name of the sender blurred out, or showing emails with, again, the name of the sender, the email addresses, etc., blurred out. There is really no reason for her to be withholding any sort of evidence, even if her sources want to remain private. Candace also has been increasingly saying this thing that really rubs me the wrong way, which is when she says, I don't know, but I know. And the reason this rubs me the wrong way so often is because so often she's saying it when she is accusing someone of doing something. She's readily admitting that she doesn't have evidence for the claim she's making, that she doesn't have any real proof, even proof that she's keeping to herself, even proof where maybe she doesn't have evidence. So for example, someone having personally told her something firsthand, that wouldn't be something that she could produce as evidence, but it could give her actual knowledge that something had happened, right? Or that something was true. But when she says, I don't know, but I know, she's making it clear that she doesn't even have that sort of evidence or proof at all. And yet she's making this claim, which is essentially, or at least very close to, slandering that person if she's accusing someone of wrongdoing. And what I think is so problematic about this is that it turns her investigations into these gossipy, he said, she said catfights. And not only does that feel really just unhealthy, but it also distracts from the most important issues. So for example, with the investigation of Charlie Kirk's murder, the really important issue here is the fact that the FBI is clearly lying to us. They have changed their story multiple times. There are things about their story that simply does not add up. So many things that don't make sense. I went through a lot of those things in my episode earlier this week. So if you want to know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to that episode. But that's the important thing here. The government is lying to us, and clearly they are trying to distract us. They're trying to trick us into believing that the wrong person, that someone else killed Charlie than the person who's actually responsible for the murder, or they're protecting somebody else who wasn't involved. Something wrong is being done here, and we really should know the truth about the situation so that justice can be done, and so that the government, the people in the government, know that they can't get away with just trying to fleece us. But Candace is getting so caught up in this back and forth, he said, she said sort of fight with all these powerful people that is really distracting from that issue. And not only is it taking people's eyes off of figuring out what the truth is and keeping the government and the people in the government accountable, but it's also really, like I said, damaging Candace's credibility. And so that is making her much less able to have people believe her about what happened in the Charlie Kirk situation itself, and instead is focusing people on whether or not she is telling the truth and her accusations against these other people are true, or whether they're telling the truth, and it's just not the main issue. One big example of this is her ongoing feud with Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Candace has never come out and explicitly said Bibi did it or Netanyahu was involved in Charlie's killing. But from the very first episode that she did, where she was investigating the Charlie Kirk murder, she brought Israel, and she brought specifically Benjamin Netanyahu into the conversation. And she made it so clear, without actually saying it, that she thought that Netanyahu was involved, that literally hundreds of people were commenting during her live stream and saying explicitly, Bibi did it. So then Benjamin Netanyahu comes out, and I believe twice now he has publicly made the announcement that he did not kill Charlie Kirk and that he was not involved, and that to believe that or to think that even for a moment is ridiculous. Now, Candace has responded by saying, this is pretty suspicious. Why is Bibi coming out and saying, I didn't do it? I never said he did it. Why does he feel like he needs to make this statement? That's pretty suspicious. Candace says, I didn't need to come out and say, I didn't kill Charlie. Megyn Kelly didn't come out and say, I didn't kill Charlie, right? That was completely unnecessary because nobody thought we did. So why is Bibi coming out and saying, I didn't kill Charlie? So suspicious. Here's the thing, though. Even if Candace never said Bibi did it, lots of other people did. And I think that I don't think she's in denial. I think that she is lying if she says that she doesn't know where they got that idea, because she made that idea so obvious, so front and center, that she was suspicious, at least, that Netanyahu was involved, that I think she knows exactly where that idea came from, and she definitely heard/saw a lot of people saying that in her comment section. So I think that she has kind of cornered Netanyahu in this logical fallacy of damned if you do, damned if you don't. If he doesn't say anything, then she could say he's not denying it. And if he does say something, if he says, I didn't kill Charlie, then she can say, that's pretty suspicious. Why do you feel like you need to say that? Now, I'm coming down kind of hard on Candace in this episode. The truth is, I really admire Candace. I think that she's right about so many things, and I definitely admire her ability to spin a story, to hold an audience captive, to inspire an audience around some sort of crusade or mission. That is really, really powerful, and she is so talented. And I also really appreciate that she is using her power mostly for good, okay? She is bringing so many important things to light, and she is determined to figure out the truth. But my fear is that too often she tries to force the evidence to fit her narrative, or to convince people of suspicions she has and communicate them as facts that she knows, even when she admits that she doesn't have real evidence. And there are a few big problems with doing this, with trying to force the evidence to fit the narrative instead of the other way around. The first big problem is that you might not actually uncover the truth, right? If Candace is so convinced that Netanyahu is responsible, and I'm not saying she necessarily is, but I think she's suspicious at least, then she might fail to find out who is actually responsible. And then that person would never be brought to justice. And that would be a tragedy, not just because of the tragic nature of Charlie Kirk's death, but also, obviously, and this is secondary, but Candace is pouring all of this time and energy and effort into figuring out who did it and bringing that person to justice. So it would really be a shame if she ended up ultimately failing in doing so. Another reason this is so problematic is, again, because it is distracting from the real issue. When she is charging forward and making all of these wild accusations, it is distracting people from the real issues, from really examining what the FBI is telling us and what the evidence says. And then finally, obviously, If she makes claims that ultimately prove to turn out to be false, that is going to really undermine her credibility and cause people to doubt everything that she says, which ultimately could blunt or even completely undermine her ability to speak for truth and to uncover truth in the future. All right, well, that is everything for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope you found this one interesting and thought-provoking. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this new show of mine so you can catch all the future episodes.